On this episode of Screenwriting on the Wall, I deliver a controversial opinion, then disappear. Josh slightly agrees with me, but doesn't really. And Jacob, of course, disagrees with me totally. This is Screenwriting on the Wall. Welcome back to Screenwriting on the Wall, the best podcast, it can't be argued at all, about film review and media and literally anything that comes to you on a screen. This is the best place to come for any news updates and actual quality review of said content on the screen. Of course, we have the most informed opinion of all of us, Joshua Pruitt over there. We've got someone who's just happy to be included for once, Jacob Stewart, and you've got me, the ringleader, Zach Ruppel. And today we're going to once again talk about The Last of Us, since the season is all wrapped up now, since we're back, and it's the biggest thing that all three of us have watched most recently. How we missed an Avatar Way of the Water video, we don't know. It takes us a while to film these things. But before we jump into that conversation...
The Way of Water.
Whatever. Way of Water, Way of the Water. Who cares? Just for that, Jacob, you get to tell us how you're doing first, and then we might care about Josh.
I'm getting a phone call from James Cameron, and he's wanting to talk to you. He doesn't sound happy.
That's what I'm talking about. Way to back me up.
Wow, okay. Well, in that case, you know what? I don't care how you guys have been doing recently. We're jumping right into this conversation, and I'm going to start it off real spicy like right here. So The Last of Us, airing on HBOMax, wrapped up a couple weeks ago, and going to be honest, I was kind of underwhelmed with the season finale. It didn't really feel like a season finale. It was just, I just kind of felt like that's how we're going to end this show. Like that's how we're ending it. I was just kind of underwhelmed. It was a shorter episode than most of the episodes in the season. And I just felt like it didn't have, this is the season finale episode, by the way, not like the past 3 episodes that came out from the moment we recorded the last podcast.
Then let me ask you this. You said it didn't feel like a season finale episode. I'm going to need more clarification. What would have made it feel like a season finale episode for you personally?
So what hit me, right? One, I think it was kind of short. Like, it was almost like kind of noticeably shorter than the other episodes that had come out. Even so much that my wife said, that was kind of short. And I looked at the time, I was like, wow, it is kind of short. I think it was like 45 minutes compared to the normal 55 to an hour runtime of the other ones. But also, I felt like it didn't have that big peak culmination moment, which may just be a horrible opinion on my part. Because I think I get that the big culmination moment was supposed to be Joel making his no-go-back decision to get through the hospital, get Ellie, take her out, even though it might not have been Ellie's choice to do that. Mm-hmm. I get that. So maybe the take is that, I don't know, it wasn't done in a way in which, for me, it felt like a big, like, oh crap, he actually just did all that moment. That's what I got to say about that.
Okay, and I'm holding my hand because I know that I know once Josh gets going on this, is like he's gonna have a lot to say about this. I feel like, so I just want to get in my 2 cents really quick. So for me, the whole idea of the show, and from what I've heard about what the creator of the game and the show, Neil Druckmann, has said, is that the game and subsequently the first season of the show is about love, or more specifically, like the dark side of love, like the things that you'd be willing to do for love. And we see that theme unfolded in a lot of different ways throughout the season. I feel like, we see with Bill and Frank what they're willing to do, like give their lives to each other, like eventually like die for each other type thing. And with Henry and Sam, I think were their names. We saw what all Henry was willing to do for his little brother, like kill that rebel leader and stuff like that. And we've just seen different variations of it throughout the show, and so I feel like the finale kind of perfectly put that theme into action by showing what Joel was actually willing to do for Ellie, if that makes sense.
Well, for starters, I'm actually going to kind of not necessarily agree with Zach, but address some of the things that he said, and actually talk about somebody else that I spoke to on the finale as well. But for just to kind of, before I go into that, I don't necessarily agree. I think the finale is great, but it is the shortest episode, right? I don't remember the exact runtime, but I do remember before I even started it noticing that it was the shortest episode. And I think overall significantly less happens in this episode than any other episode, right? There doesn't feel like there's a big thing other than what happens in the hospital, which is big, but maybe it falls flat in comparison to some of the things that we've already seen. That doesn't really feel like this large culmination of everything that's happened building up to this moment for some people. I don't really know. For me, it worked, but I also want to speak from the sense of again knowing the beats of the game. Like none of the things that happened in this episode, which was literally almost beat for beat what happens in the game, other than some minor tweaks here and there. It's like downright verbatim, exactly how the end of the game goes. But I want to talk about somebody else that I'd spoke to earlier this week about the finale as well, because unlike you, Zach, they actually have played the game, and that's not like a diss, but they actually have played the game and they love it. They said they've played it multiple times. This is just a friend of mine that just brought up the series and we started talking about it, and he was like, man, I loved the show, but I didn't like the finale. And we didn't go into too many specifics on why, but now that you bring it up as well, I'm actually beginning to wonder if it has something to do with the episodic nature of the show compared to the game. Because I'm like, how can you not like the finale but love the end of the game when it is exactly the same? And part of me wonders if it's because we waited a week for very little to happen. And in the game, you kind of like all of the tension is still built up, and everything is still running off of each other, and it's like continuously flowing. And here it's like, okay, we waited a week. For many fans, some did, some didn't, we already knew exactly what was going to play out. And the end of the game, again, except for that hospital scene, is very slow. It's supposed to be this really big emotional moment. A lot of it is more about the choice that Joel makes at the end of the game rather than killing a bunch of people in itself. And a lot of it plays into like, oh, what type of decision was this? Was it this good decision that Joel made, or was it a bad decision? And plays into the type of person as he is, because there's a whole argument, like, did he do the right thing or the wrong thing? And that's a complex answer depending on your perspective, right? But that's something that everybody knows already. And so I actually think that that's an interesting conversation, because you are not the first person to bring that up, to say that the show that final episode just fell a little flat for them, because I'm not exactly sure why. That's my theory, is that maybe it's just because it was just this last episode and we waited a week to get here, and maybe if we were able to binge watch it, maybe if someone binge watched it, it would feel a little bit different for them. I'm not sure. But I do kind of understand what you're saying.
See, and
that's pretty much all I wanted to touch in on that nature.
See, I'm kind of almost. I understand what you're saying, and I can understand where you're coming from, but I can't fully wrap my head around like the complaint that it was too short. Like, I get wanting more, but to me, it still felt really well paced, and I don't know.
But again, that's kind of like what I'm saying too, though, because I don't necessarily think that people's complaints are that it is too short. Like, before I went into it, I was like, oh man, I'm upset that it's short, but that's just because I didn't want the show to end. I didn't really have a problem with the episode itself being short. I was like, if this is how much time it takes to wrap things up, that's how much time it takes. And because of the track record so far, I went into it even still with full confidence that they were going to be able to do it, and they did. But I think it has less to do with the runtime more than that just being a coincidence from the fact that it like Zach said, it maybe just doesn't feel like this big final moment.
Okay, so, and I guess
Like
kind of
short.
like building off what you said about how you mentioned the episodic nature of the show earlier. And I think part of both the strength and I guess from this perspective, a flaw of that episodic style of the show is that each episode kind of feels like a mini movie. And as such, you have basically a mini climax for each episode. It reaches like this emotional peak or like this exciting, like thrilling climax or something. And I guess for some, the final episode may not have been as impactful as the emotional climaxes of other episodes, like, you know, like the winter episode or the Henry and Sam episode or what have you. So I guess I could understand that to an extent, but I don't know. Maybe it's like you were saying. Maybe it's just because I've played the game before. Like I'm so familiar with the beats, and I thought it was a perfect ending in the game. Maybe I can't look at it, you know, without bias. But I don't know. To me, I thought it was just as good as it was in the game.
Right. I'm also wondering now, okay, and this thought actually just popped up in my mind now that I'm like thinking through the different things that could cause people to believe that or feel that way about the finale. I'm wondering if it has anything to do with that final scene in the hospital as well, because in the game you get to play through it as Joel.
It's
killing
presented in the
hospital.
game. It's presented in the game as an action sequence, whereas in the show, it's portrayed as purely just a character decision. Like it's not.
Yes.
It's not meant for you to be like excited about it. It's meant like, okay, this is a decision Joel is making. If that
Right,
makes sense.
and that's the argument that I was making a second ago. But I'm also wondering if it's even more than that, because whenever we see Joel kill people in other episodes, most notably when they first crash in not Pittsburgh, Kansas City, right, in the show. When they first crash the truck in there, we get that, you know, the one of the arguably more intense killings in the game when the dude's pleading for his life. We get the set with that kill, and this final scene, despite it being this big culmination of everything that they've gone through and this big decision for Joel, and this is something that I kind of pointed out to you, Jacob, but I think it was mostly because I don't really know that I cared for the music choice, but it happens as a montage, and it feels less, you feel like less tied to the decision he's making almost. And it's like, I think I do understand the decision they were going for there, especially piggybacking off what you just said, that it's kind of played out as more of a decision and less of like this big action moment thing. But at the same time, I feel like it does come across as less impactful that it's played out that way instead of us kind of getting to watch through it all.
I understand that, but I disagree with it, and here's why. So,
Boys.
what?
I'm still here. So,
I'm sorry, Zach.
Do you have your hand raised?
No, I didn't. I did not have my hand raised.
Well.
But you were talking about the music choice and everything, and I get not liking that. I do. But to me, it made sense. And, like, I'm not saying it was the only right way to do it. But to me, it almost felt like, I don't know, like time, like the fact that it was a montage, it almost felt like, how do I put this? Like, it almost felt like time was moving faster for Joel. Not that it was like a heat of the moment decision. Like, Joel knew what he was doing, but I don't know. Maybe things like when you make a big decision like that, like maybe it just feels more heightened. Like, I don't know if I'm explaining this well, but
Yeah, and it's hard for me to say that I would have done it differently too when I don't like. I obviously haven't really thought about what the alternatives to it would be.
yeah.
I mean, there's a number of options I guess you could have gone with. You still could have maybe made it feel intense and like this really heightened choice and maybe the intensity in the moment. But I don't know. I actually do kind of think that maybe I would would have liked to have seen that done differently.
Yeah.
Well,
to me,
overall, to me, I'm wondering if not really whether that decision was good or bad, but I'm wondering if that plays into how people feel about the final episode.
Yeah.
I don't really know.
Like, to me, the reason it worked is because, and I'm pretty sure I mentioned this to you, like, in every episode that we watched. Like, they made and I think I also mentioned this in the last episode, that they purposely made a decision not to show Joel really being that violent throughout the show. Like, especially when you compare it to the game, where he's, like, a mass murderer before he even gets to the hospital, basically. Like, we see, like, when we do see him kill people, like, it's maybe one or two, and it's in, like, a really desperate situation where you can justify it as, like, oh, he had no choice. But when he gets here, we see him literally kill, like, dozens of people. And, I don't know, I like that it kind of built up to that, and it made it kind of, I don't know, made it more, it was kind of like it made you feel more when it happened, if that makes sense.
Here's something how many episodes are in the show? How many episodes was it? 9?
9 episodes.
9 episodes, okay. Episode 1, we have the opening of the game, right? Mm-hmm. That's episode 1, okay? And it ends when Sarah dies, right?
No, it ends after you have a time jump, and then it ends.
Does it end after Tess dies?
No, that's episode 2.
No.
Episode 1 ends when they're taking Ellie out of the city and Joel kills that guard.
Yeah.
You're right. Okay, so episode 1, we get Joel's backstory and first kill of the game or of the show, and Joel's really resentful.
Joel's killed like 20 people by that point in the game.
Yeah, game not pending. Okay, so that's episode 1. Episode 2, Tess dies. Episode 3, Bill and Frank. Mm-hmm. We all know what happens there. Episode 4 is
Kansas City.
Sam and Henry die, right?
That's episode 5. They meet.
Is there
Henry
2 episodes?
Sam. Yes. Yeah, there's 2 Henry and Sam episodes.
So that's a twofer right there.
Basically.
Of 4 and 5. But in 4, where we get the really dramatic kill of that guy, and we set up the consequences of all that. Yeah. And then in episode 5, we get Sam and Henry both end up dying, and we get the resolution to all of the conflict in 4. And then 6 is
Tommy.
We meet Tommy again, and we kind of see these people live in, and a little bit more of Joel's past and some bad decisions and how it doesn't have to be blah, 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 blah.
And Joel gets stabbed with a bat.
Yes, and then Joel gets stabbed, and Joel goes down. 7 is Ellie backstory. Mm-hmm. Adequately, perfectly timed Ellie backstory. 8 is the cannibals.
Yep.
And 9 is the season finale. Okay,
so I would like to talk about the cannibal episode sometime in this episode too.
We certainly can. We can right after this. But I would like to... So we have all these episodes that lead up, and I feel like in each one of these episodes, a death is very important, and how that affects Joel or Ellie or the both of them, and our perspective on the world, and kind of how you go back to love Jacob, because each one of them has a relationship kind of tied like that. Mm-hmm. And the death part is all really key to like a lot of this, and all these repercussions from violence upon violence upon violence, which is a big motive of The Last of Us Part 2. Anyway, not talking about that yet. So you get to the season finale, and I feel like the season finale is in the prime position to be, you have had 8 episodes of Joel and Ellie dealing with everybody else's bullcrap affecting them and all these people that they know. Here's Joel and Ellie and where they are at now. And for that to be the shortest episode, which I know just it being short isn't a problem, but I think they could have made it longer. Like they could have, and put in a lot more Joel and Ellie story beats where we see the fulfillment that Joel has kind of now adopted Ellie as surrogate daughter, and we get more time of that. Ellie's maybe fights back against that. She's not sure how she feels about that, but she has a lot of respect for Joel and a lot of caring relationship for Joel. You get more of that, which I think they tried to do in the first half of that episode before they get knocked out, but it just really felt almost forced and really disoriented. I kind of remember that watching it the first time, where I just kind of felt like I get Ellie just went through this really traumatic thing, and so her character's really shut off, and she's going through a lot, she's thinking through a lot. And Joel has now kind of come full circle where he realizes that Ellie is more to him than just like cargo, and he can't deny that anymore. But the whole first half of that, it just felt really, it didn't feel super sincere, and it didn't hammer home to me that we were at a very intense point with their relationship for the both of them. And then they get knocked out, and we're in the hospital, and kind of going to what Josh and you guys went on to about this hospital scene, because it's the culmination of the season and ultimately the episode. You're right. Like, I had no doubt. I didn't play the games. I knew how they ended, so I knew it was coming. But I had no doubt, kind of even without that what was about to happen was about to happen. Like, there was no big moment emphasized or played up that Joel might consider Ellie like what she's like. Ellie would want this, Ellie would want this, Ellie would want this, and he just can't fight that anymore because he's makes self-decision for what he wants and kind of whatever. There was no, like, I think everyone knew that regardless of game or whatever, that he was about to do what he was about to do. And then to go from that to it being a montage, so for it to go from being telegraphed that I think he was about to do what he was about to do, to then it being the montage style that it was, where we just got to see Joel be a cold-blooded killer. And then to get to the pinnacle of that, which is the doctor scene, where he really still can say, I can't do it, and just let it happen, right? For that to be almost instantaneous of the doctor, he walks in, the doctor says, you're not stopping me, and basically charges him with a scalpel, and Joel just drops him. Like, it just felt like there was so much more room and runtime for them to add weight to that, where he murders a couple fireflies, and you're like hammered home that he is just dropping these people, and like he's almost hunting them down as he goes through the halls, and like he is being merciless. Like, you see the old army Joel come out, and he's just, you get to see a different animal, really ingrained, where you almost start to not like Joel. And then in the hospital scene, like, have the doctor just like almost do what Marlene did, where he doesn't instantly put it where it's almost like a self-defense thing because he rushes Joel with a scalpel, but where he's like trying to rationalize with him and trying to appease him, and Joel has to make the same decision he makes with Marlene, where he goes, no, because you'll just come after her, like, you'll just come after her again. Y'all are a threat to her and me. Do it. And it puts it all on Joel that he made the intentional decision to do all of this coldly, calculatedly, and you feel every hit. I think that's what was missing for me, because like what all you guys said beforehand, it just felt so, there it was, like so cold, so quick. Like, there was never a moment of seeing Joel as kind of a monster and feeling like the total consequences of what he is doing right now, and also Ellie's kind of opinion being brought in. Because I think the only outside opinion you have that Ellie really doesn't want this is a couple times she hints that it can't all be for nothing during the show, all this suffering or whatever. But then Marlene kind of just says, like, it's not what she would want. It's not whatever. And I just feel like that wasn't enough when you have a whole season finale. It's just going to be Joel and Ellie, basically, and you could hammer home the nuances of their relationship. I think that's, for me, where it fell flat. Like, it didn't take the time it needed to really just beat in the Joel and Ellie relationship and the weight that was going to be involved in the consequence in the end. That's where it lost me.
Okay. So
that was a lot for you guys to run with. Sorry.
No, I'm actually glad that you brought a lot of those points up, because whereas kind of going into this episode, I spent a lot of my time kind of maybe addressing some of the things that I understand people maybe didn't like about the finale. I think this is a good time for me to go into a lot of the things that I did like about it. Because while, like I said earlier, I do kind of agree with your opinion in the hospital with the whole sequence there. I know Jacob disagrees with us, but I do kind of feel like, the whole montage thing fell a little bit flat. But as for literally every other point that I think you brought up, I think that there are very specific moments throughout this episode, despite it being so short, that really hammer home on a lot of those things. And I think maybe the best way to walk through them is to, and that way we're including everybody in the conversation as well, is to maybe go through the episode beats, kind of beat by beat, and I'll try my best to bring them up as in order of the way that I'm remembering them, but definitely feel free to jab in if I'm going past something.
Yeah, it's like this is always it's always fascinated me how, like, and I don't mean this as a dig at all. I legitimately find it really interesting, like how, like, two people can watch the same thing and just feel like totally different about it, because like everything you said that the episode didn't make you feel, and again, this could just be my residual feelings for the game. Like, the episode made me feel all the things that it said that it didn't make you feel, which I don't know. I just find that really interesting.
Yeah, and I actually think there are a lot of things, like I said, some of the ones that Zach brought up in particular, on that note, Jacob, that I actually think the show did better. And we'll kind of cover those as we get there. So this was a moment from the game that is done a little bit differently in regards to where it happens, but it, for the most part, is still almost exactly the same. I think in the game they're in like a train station or something when Joel kind of notices how she's acting, and in the show they're like climbing up some building. But I think it's funny how in both situations Joel's trying to get a ladder down and he needs Ellie's help. Love those little bits where they bring in elements from the game, and kind of just little.
Well, the giraffe is in the game too, right?
Yeah.
Yes. Well, that's the sequence that I'm talking about.
Yeah.
It happens in a slightly different area, but for the most part, it's still exactly the same. But this is actually kind of the first of two big moments that I think address some of the points that you made about maybe like the culmination of these characters' journey and how they feel. And I feel like they both kind of happen right here. So Ellie's still kind of acting distant from everything that happened in the last episode, naturally. She's been put through the ringers. She's already
That's an understatement.
Terrible PTSD from, I mean, even before Joel met her, she was absolutely traumatized, and now it's pretty much culminated into one of the worst possible experiences a 14-year-old can have. But we kind of get through this little bit, and Ellie sees the giraffes, and she's like, "Oh, that's really cool." And Joel kind of has this heart to heart with her, and he asks her, and this is pretty much exactly from the game, but he asks her, was it everything that you hoped for? And Ellie kind of has this moment with him where, and this is again her hammering home the theme, from what you said earlier, of she's got to see this through. Like everything that she's been through, all the people that have died, it can't have been for nothing. Like she wanted this. There's no doubt in her mind that if death is what it takes for them to develop this vaccine or cure or whatever, then that's what it takes. And she knows that, and Joel knows that. She tells him that, and it's kind of him. Like there's this kind of thing of him essentially trying to almost sway her into like subtly, like, we don't have to do this. We could just leave. We don't have to see this through. She wants to see it through, but he's kind of like trying to subtly sway her, like, we don't have to keep going. Even though, even at this point, Joel doesn't even necessarily realize that she could potentially die. I don't even think that's crossed his brain yet. That, I think especially like when they get to the dam at Tommy's, he's essentially like, this is a dam, this is what it does, but don't ask me how it works. And I think this is kind of the same thing here. Like, Joel hasn't really kind of processed what could possibly happen to Ellie for them to make this procedure work. He just knows, I'm going to bring her to a bunch of doctors and they're going to do their thing. That's the only thing that's popped through his head.
Oh,
and he hasn't kind of gotten to that yet.
I have to mention this real quick before you move on, because it just pinged my memory because you brought up the Tommy episode about the dam. And there's a scene in there where he's talking to Tommy, and he like breaks down because he thought Ellie was going to get freaking chewed up by that dog. And he was like, he's just breaking down because he couldn't do anything. And he was part of him telling her to go with Tommy or whatever. But like, I just made that illusion now. And maybe it's just my failure as a viewer, but like, I think that would have been a great tie-in later to the finale of the last time Ellie stood at death's door, Joel was kind of in shock and didn't do anything. And I think there would have been a great poetry rhyme moment for him.
But that's kind of like the theme of the entire show. I mean, Joel wasn't able to do anything when Sarah died. He did step up in the first episode, the first time that Ellie is potentially under threat, and beat the crap out of that guard, the first person we see him kill in the show. But then, again, with the dog, he kind of freezes up and can't do anything. I mean, that's the entire theme of his choice. But see, in the first, is he's not going to do nothing this time. Like he's
in the first episode,
do whatever it takes.
In the first episode, though, there's that brief flashback, and we get to see what Joel is thinking and why he does what he does. Because when that guard's pointing the gun,
I agree with Josh. The flashback to me felt way too on the nose. Because I mean, like we already had the intentional framing of the flashlight in his face and the gun pointed at him. That's all we needed. Like let the audience piece it together. Like
I love little insights like that.
Complicated.
Like I don't know. I like little stuff like that. Like maybe the montage. Like if I went back and rewatched it, I would be like, yeah, that's kind of on the nose. Like we get kind of what he's doing. But like you said, even before the montage, like they framed it the way it was and they set it up a lot of the way. But I don't think there was any like attempt at a callback when Joel was trying to make this ultimately very consequential decision. And
I think that's where we
Ellie's life on the
disagree
line.
because I don't think they needed a callback.
I don't know. I felt like it was good just to hammer home how big of a decision this was for Joel.
See,
for me, it just felt very easy for him to make.
I feel like I don't know. I feel like you need to be more subtle with stuff like that. Like that may just be a personal preference. Like I don't know. Like to me, it makes rewatches more interesting because I could like if I did miss some themes or something, I could be like, oh, okay, they were hinting at this, and I don't know. Like it may
I just have to rewatch this like Guardians Volume 2.
Especially in that first episode, like I actually think it's not necessarily that I'm agreeing with you, Zach, but I actually think it's really interesting that they put the flashback in that first episode, but they didn't in this one, because I think in the first episode it is so insanely obvious that I literally have no idea why they felt they needed to put that in there.
I fully agree.
They didn't want to add it in a later part where maybe it was less obvious, like you're saying. But either way, I don't think it should have been in either. Just to help prove my point, that's all I'm saying. Anyway, kind of moving on from the literal theme of the show.
Post giraffe. Well, no, not even post giraffe.
There's another scene where they're talking after this, and correct me if I'm wrong, Josh. I don't think this line of dialogue was in the game, but it might be my favorite. It might be my favorite line of dialogue from the show. Like,
this is what I was referring to earlier when I said that I actually think this is one of the things that the show did miles better. Mm-hmm. I love this little bit between him and Ellie. Because they get outside post the giraffe, and Joel basically kind of told her the story earlier in the show about how he got a scar on his face, and he basically said that a guy shot at him and missed, right? And it kind of comes back around, and Joel basically reveals to Ellie that he was the person who shot and missed, right? And so they never directly say anything in this conversation. And I think that's why it's so perfect, because it's so easy to understand and follow, and it feels so much more powerful that they don't necessarily say it to each other. Well, but Joel's basically implying that he tried to kill himself and screwed it up. And during the, what were you gonna say, Jacob? Sorry.
Well, there was specifically a line of dialogue that happens after Joel talks about his suicide attempt that, like I said, might be my favorite in the show, where Ellie's like, so I guess time heals all wounds, and Joel's like, wasn't time that did it. I absolutely love that line.
Because
I was really worried you were going to name some obscure line I didn't remember, but I'm glad I remember that one.
No, because I mean that's like the whole point of what I was saying, right? So it's like they're essentially saying, "I love you" to each other, right? But neither of them actually say it. And there's something that Ellie says right after that as well, because Joel says it wasn't time that did it, and oh, she says, oh well, I'm glad that didn't work out, right? And it's like it's essentially Joel with his line, it wasn't time that healed all my wounds. Essentially saying it was you. He's essentially saying I love you, and by her saying, oh, I'm glad that didn't work out, she's almost saying it back, and it's really, I think it's really a really really good way for these two characters to with the type of people that they are to kind of express their feelings to one another.
Because both of these characters are incredibly,
had.
yeah, like both these characters are incredibly traumatized and emotionally closed off, and I think it's the only way that would have made sense for them to say that they love each other, honestly.
Right.
Because like if you had actually had Joel say like I love you or something, it would have just been too cheesy. It wouldn't have worked.
Now, despite the fact that that line and that conversation as a whole didn't happen in the game, there was another moment in that same area that it basically replaced, and that's that when Sarah and Joel are at Tommy's, Maria gives her a photo of him and Sarah, the same one that Tommy tried to offer him but he refused to take, and that entire bit is not in the show at all. But in the game, Tommy offers him an old photo of him and Sarah, and Joel doesn't want anything to do with it at the time, but then Maria gives it to Ellie, and Ellie later gives it to Joel in this same moment where we get this new piece of dialogue, because the photograph isn't in the show at all. But it kind of plays out in a similar way. But again, this is so much more powerful to me, and I love this a lot more. And I think that it kind of hammers home on maybe some of your points, Zach, that maybe it didn't necessarily feel like there was a lot of things that culminated in the way that they feel. Like maybe you feel like there should have been more runtime to help build out how these characters feel about each other.
Yeah.
I kind of disagree with that in a way, because I feel like even though it is a short runtime, they do it swiftly, but
there wasn't a wasted moment.
Done.
Like there wasn't any
very...
like wasted space. Like it was very economical in how they structured it. Like every moment like was either servicing the characters or the story or the themes.
So after this moment in the game, they go into a tunnel, and Ellie ends up getting thrown into this big stream, and
they also fight a bunch of infected.
Drowns. Yeah, they fight a bunch of infected, and Ellie's like knocked out, and a bunch of guards come up, and Joel's trying to like save her, and they basically knock him out. Same thing, he still ends up knocked out. They both end up knocked out in the show. I'm trying to remember exactly how that plays out in the show, though.
They're just walking. They're just walking, and she's reading puns, and the flashbang rolls up behind them.
Pun book.
Is the pun book in the games?
Yes.
Well, that's nice.
And they are the same puns. they use the exact same ones.
And I want to say some of the puns from the pun book are like, they're not like all in cutscenes. Like a lot of them are just like when you're walking around, she'll like read some off to Joel or something.
Pretty much all of them, yeah.
Yeah, they're like optional dialogue. What were you gonna say, Zach?
Going back through the episode and having it refreshed and remembering it, it makes it a lot better. And like I might just have to rewatch it and give it like a good critical watch through. I watched this with my wife in bed when it came out, so I can go back through and overanalyze it to my heart's content. But
and that's another thing. Josh and I have had like, Josh had years. I've had like a year because I played the game last year, but we've had a longer amount of time to, I guess, like process the themes. So I guess a lot of them may be more obvious to us on first watch, just because like we've already spent like a long time like over analyzing it and like talking it to death.
Yeah, but like my point being, right, is in this episode that they have let the runtime be whatever. I'm sorry I keep bringing up runtime because I really don't want this to be like, oh, Zach just wishes the finale was an hour and a half.
No,
I mean, I do too, to be honest with you.
But my point is,
saying.
To the cold open, you are 13 minutes into the episode before you finish the cold open. So from the 12-minute 41 mark to the 25-minute, basically the 26-minute mark, that is the Joel and Ellie bond time of this episode. which is like 15 minutes. Not even. It's not even 15 minutes.
Like we were talking about, it does happen very swiftly, but like he said, not a moment of it is wasted. Like every
That's true.
single bit of it is used to help you realize this is where the relationship is at now.
Yeah, it's true, because I like a lot of it because it starts out with Joel trying to get her to, like, bringing up Boggle to her, and you get this appeal that he's like some dad trying to relate to his teenage daughter he has no idea how to do. And they go through, and you figure out that they're the same person because she knows what he's going to do when they're in the city and climb up there and scout out and see their path ahead and all that crap. So you get the sense that they've really bonded and that it's some sort of broken family dynamic kind of now. Then they get to Giraffe, and they kind of start bonding. He has something he can bond with his daughter with, for lack of better words. And he tries to get her perspective, asking her about was it all worth it, and her opinions on things, which he doesn't really agree with, because he's like, I want you to be with me forever. And then he tells he tells her his side, of how she basically saved him because he wanted to kill himself after Sarah died. And now he has Ellie, and it's kind of just like reawoken a lot of stuff in him. And then, that's it. And then you build to the second half of the hospital. But the thing with the hospital, right, is like, you're in the hospital and he's talking to Marlene, and he's like, they're not going to, usual Joel defiance of you're not going to kill her or whatever. And he's talking to Marlene and whatnot. But I mean, that's kind of it as far as building up. It's that one Marlene conversation as far as him building up to this ultimate choice, which is kind of what I was getting at before.
But that was going to be the last point that I brought up in regards to your argument, is that I think earlier you were talking about how maybe there are moments where Joel should like battle with this internally a little bit more.
I feel like it's kind of the point that he doesn't.
Joel has already made up his mind as soon as Marlene says that Ellie's in surgery, and it's like literally the moment that he finds out that she's gonna die, he knows exactly what he's got to do, and it's literally just him waiting for the right opportunity to be able to do it, because he knows if he dies, then Ellie dies. If he screws everything, like if he screws up rescuing her, she dies. And so it's not like he can just go into it with haste. Like I think that he's so, like, I think the fact that he's so methodical about it and is patient enough to even wait for the right moment says a lot.
Well, and it's like going back to what
immediately just go on a killing rampage.
Well, it's like going back to what Neil Druckmann said about the story being about the dark side of love, basically. Like it's twisted, but he loves Ellie so much that like he doesn't even think twice. He's like, yeah, I'm gonna kill everybody that gets in my way, and I'm not gonna regret it. I'm not gonna, and I feel like to an extent, Zach, some of your criticisms are actually addressed to an extent in part 2, the game, and we'll see if they are in like season 2 and beyond. But like, I feel like
it's going to be in multiple seasons. I saw an announcement.
Yeah. And I feel like this isn't really a spoiler to say, but like Joel tells Ellie at one point, like, if I had another chance in the game, that if I had another chance to, if God put me back at that hospital for a second chance, I would do it all over again. And this is like years.
I love that.
This like years and years after the fact, and so I feel like, I feel like if he was showing any sort of struggle during the fact, it wouldn't make it less powerful. But I do get what you're saying, though.
Yeah, I don't know. And I think we've aired out differences in opinions as much as we can, because it's one of those good things that I think hammers home how good of The Last of Us was. I still really like the show. I just had these are nitpicks upon nitpicks of a great show that has ended now. So I think it's just a testament to how good it is.
Yeah, that it fosters discussion
discussion about it, and I think it's good that it can leave people with different discussions and whatnot, and different opinions on different things, because it was really good. But I mean, we could go on talking about opinions for forever and ever and ever, but we do need to end at some point. And so to grant Jacob's wish, how we will end is talking about the episode that we skipped like a little brother. The episode 8 episode with the cannibals that has been overshadowed by our finale episode. So Jacob, tell us how you feel about the cannibal episode.
I I mean, like, I thought it was phenomenal, but, like, I was really excited about that episode because it's, like, when I first played the game, that was, like, by far the highlight of the experience when I was first playing the game. Is I want to say, like, I was playing it, like, during COVID or something. I think I was having to, like, isolate, like, in my place for a couple days because I want to say, like, there was, like, a outbreak at work or something like that. I don't know. Like, basically all I really was able to do at the time was just sit around and play Last of Us. And I was up playing it till like 2 a.m. that day, and like I never do that, but I was so like just into this game and the story. And when I got to the winter portion, because one thing the show doesn't do that the game did was the game separates each of the story moments into the 4 seasons, and like the cannibal stuff takes place in winter, obviously. But yeah, I was playing that, and like it started snowing outside, like right when I started playing that, so just kind of like it fit the vibe perfectly. It was just a really cool moment, and I thought they adapted it to screen pretty much perfectly, and I thought Bella Ramsey's performance in that episode especially was just absolutely phenomenal. And like I don't know how people could say that, like, recast her for season 2 and stuff like that. Like, I don't get that. I don't get that at all. Like, I thought her performance was like amazing, particularly in that episode.
Here's what I would like to say in regards to that last comment too. Going forward, and I know that we have talked about this before, Jacob. I don't know if we mentioned it on the last episode of this podcast, but going forward, man, I feel so bad for whoever they cast as Abby because
everybody hates
we're
her.
already seeing it. We're already seeing it with Bella Ramsey, but people just crap all over these people and these characters. Man, there's clearly gonna be like I feel like there's gonna be some undeserved controversy going forward with some of the characters and their choices, and I have little to no doubt that they're gonna stick to their guns in adapting the characters the way that they are in the second game.
Yeah,
but
I don't think they'll take the coward's way out.
If they do, it's definitely gonna raise some.
That's what you got. That's what you got to do. You got to have a
people,
story, and you got to
sure.
believe in it. Like, even if other people don't.
Absolutely.
So on the cannibal episode, that was a pretty good episode all around. It was pretty cool. But because you get a culmination of a lot of things. You get like Joel gets up, he like fights through death and probably severe pain for Ellie. So you really start to see how dedicated he is. But also, you just kind of see Ellie's will to survive on her own. She basically gets out of that situation without Joel. No, she gets out of that situation without Joel. I forget, he did never make it there. I think it was just, that was done so well. Like, I think that whole episode is done so, like, it may be my favorite episode of the whole series with how well it's done with the villains and the group and all of that. Because there's just, I don't know, like that one connected with me. Like, I think how you guys, I don't know if y'all felt the same about that. Like, Jacob, you might have had a similar experience with your whole snow day revelation with it in the game or whatever. But, like, kind of how y'all were talking about with the early games and how, like, Bill and Frank was, like, a really big episode and it's, like, a favorite episode. And, like, certain other episodes were really good and just connected with you certain ways. Like, the Cannibal episode was that for me. Not because of any dietary similarities, but just the way the characters were all written and how that whole arc played out. It was great. The question I want to pose, and we can kind of just start wrapping up with this, and I don't know where this question is going to lead.
Oh, Lord.
The end of episode 8 with its set piece, fire, Ellie and that dude, final showdown, all of that intensity. Do you feel that was matched in the season finale final set piece to close out the whole show?
Okay, so I think it's really interesting that you bring that up because a couple of minutes ago when you decided to switch over to talking about episode 8, it actually got me thinking about the conversation from when we first started talking, because I think it's hilarious that I actually do think episode 8 was a lot more intense, and yet we still started this episode off talking about the finale. Like, that was most of what was on our minds. Obviously it was the last episode, so you're wrapping a lot of things up regardless. But I do think that's funny that we pretty much glossed over episode 8 entirely and are coming back to it as an afterthought.
Yeah. It's
Despite
like the little
fact that
stepbrother.
it is
No matter what it
arguably-
achieves, no matter what it achieves, it'll never be as good as its season finale that just happened to be talked about more. It's the younger, it's the middle child. Gosh darn it.
I think the season finale accomplishes a lot more for the entire show, like in terms of character arcs and where a lot of the story was going. But I do think that episode 8, I do think that episode 8 is really good. And
Yeah,
I
it
think
was.
that it's
sorry.
very impactful and intense.
Yeah, like to answer your question from my perspective, like it was more intense than the finale, but they were trying to do different things story wise. I
Yeah.
think because
Yeah.
you look at it like episode 8 is from Ellie's perspective, and it's literally like a child being put in these like extremely harsh, unforgiving conditions. So like naturally it needs to feel a little bit more intense. Whereas in the finale, it's mostly from Joel's perspective, and like he's like the monster of the episode. Like he's the thing that other people are afraid of. So like you're not gonna feel the tension necessarily because like that climax wasn't so much about is Joel gonna make it out of this. It was more about, like I said earlier, like it was more about his decision. So yeah, it's less intense, but I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing.
I think I just need to rewatch the episode in a dark room, focused on the episode, take it all in, and gather it in. I think also not playing the game has hurt me with this show, with all the really minute underlying story beats, because you get a lot more playing a game and living it basically and over time than just watching 9 episodes of a TV show week to week. So I think I'm going to make it my mission to rewatch the show and pick up on some better story beats and whatever. But again, like I said, like it's crazy that it had, it evokes. They did a good thing making a show that evoked such feelings in us with our different opinions and giving us something to talk about. So all in all, a great show that has been made, a great video game adaptation, not quite as good as Sonic the Hedgehog, but
Amen.
not everything can be a magnum opus.
Okay, so I literally just wanted to ask you guys a question that can maybe close everything out on, and that was just, what was your favorite episode and why? Now that we've seen them all, like not the ones that wrap I mean, if it's the finale, it's the finale, but not necessarily the ones that tie everything up in a bow or are the most intense or whatever. Just which one resonated with you the most? Which one was just your overall favorite?
My favorite episode was, no one else can pick this episode after I pick this episode because that's the way podcast works. My favorite episode was episode 8, as I have previously mentioned. I like the character arcs of literally everyone in that show, down to the people that were searching the houses, even the little bit of like, we got to know them before Joel mercilessly killed them. I just enjoyed all the characters in that episode. I enjoyed how far we got to see Ellie pushed and how far Ellie would go, kind of as her foil to Joel, and how Joel basically wasn't there, and we got to see even the villains kind of be kind of sympathetic, because he was kind of just like, I am leading these people. He is a messed up individual. I'm not giving him any credit. The character he plays is a messed up person, but the underlying beat is there is like, what are I supposed to do? Like, do you just let them starve? Like, where do the moral boundaries get drawn in situations like that? Which is cool. I appreciate that. The only thing I didn't appreciate about it is more of a personal note, how all these like newer shows that have come out, I found like if there's any religious person or group, they are always just the most extreme cultish religious group ever.
I've heard more than one
underlying
complaint about that, actually. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just an underlying note I have about how religious people get put into games. There's never like a complicated good one, I feel. It's always like, you're you, and then here's this religious cult. But that's my only knock on episode 8. Otherwise, I really enjoyed it.
Mm-hmm. Well, if I can't pick episode 8, and really I was kind of torn between a couple episodes. Like, while episode 8, the story that's told in it, is easily my favorite part of the game, if I'm taking the show just on its own, it might be a tie between that and the episode. I'm looking at IMDb right now. Episode 5, Endure and Survive. The one with Henry and Sam that had the big infected fight at the end, because that one made a lot. That's one of the few episodes where I thought that they just straight up did the story better than they did in the game. Like the way that they handled Henry and Sam's ending, that really, really well choreographed and just excellently done infected fight scene with the bloater and everything. Like I really thought it was all done really well. Like, because the Henry and Sam stuff, like, it was really sad and everything in the game, but like it didn't leave as much of an impact on me. Whereas like at the end of this episode, I was just like, man, you know, like it hit me a lot harder here. And so like I don't know, maybe the show on its own, that might be the best episode to me. Not counting Winter.
There you go.
But yeah.
Josh, what about you?
I think episode 5 definitely also kind of makes the impact that like Sam's death has on Ellie, like towards, I need to figure out, I have a purpose here. I think that does a little bit better in the show as well. But my favorite episode is episode 6, Kin.
That's an interesting choice.
I think that coming off of episode 5, which I thought was great, and going into after the end of episode 6, I was like, how did they do even better here? I really like that we kind of get to see him and Tommy talk, and something we don't get in the game either is something that you brought up earlier, Zach, is Joel kind of has like this breakdown to Tommy. Like, dude's essentially like letting everything that he's feeling out, and is basically just like, I can't continue to get close to this girl. Like, I'm gonna screw it up, and I can't go through that again. And his brother kind of slowly recognizing that is really, really good. But furthermore, I love just how by the end of it, when it comes around, he is able to sympathize with Ellie and know, like, okay, this is the role that I have become for her, and it's kind of my responsibility now to see this through, just like she wants to. And I don't know, I just really love that episode. I think it's the most emotional, and I think that
That's probably a good point.
I think that it's it definitely is when Joel kind of pivots from, I think it's when he pivots the most from, I'm trying to get rid of this girl as soon as possible, to I have to finish this. This is kind of who she's just becoming to me now, and it sucks, kind of, but it's also beautiful.
Well, on that note of us talking about our favorite episodes from a series that ended, granted, a while ago when this is coming out, but something that was still relevant on our minds at the time of recording, it's a nice way to put The Last of Us to bed. We're going to stop milking the best show that's come out in a while for content here. We're going to find newer things to talk about here until we get more news about part 2, and if they make part 2, because we'll probably be on it, because there's going to probably be a heap of controversies on it like the game had, or it's just going to be amazing and everyone's going to be like, oh, the show is so much better than the video game. Did we have a show adaptation that was better than the video game? Question mark, question mark, question mark. But as far as what we talk about next, you'll just have to tune in next week to find out what it's going to be about, because we don't know either. So I said next week. That's incorrect. I'm not that efficient. You're just going to have to tune in next time to figure out what we're going to talk about, because Lord knows we don't. Until then, keep watching movies, keep experiencing new shows, and we will be back again when we have something fresh to talk about.